Well, welcome everybody. For those of you who I haven't met yet, I'm Sydney. I'm a full-time MBA student and president of Rutgers Association of Marketing and Strategy, or RAMS, as you all know. Today we're going to discuss influencer marketing and practice. If we could have everyone mute during our discussion, that would be great. And as we move through, feel free to drop any follow-up questions in the chat, and we'll try to address them in the moment. But of course, we'll reserve some time at the end for a Q&A. We are so fortunate to be joined today by Amanda Russell for a fireside chat on influencer marketing. Considered one of the most influential voices in marketing today, Amanda Russell, MBA, is a leading authority on modern influence marketing and business growth. She's a two-time founder and exit CEO of two trailblazing ventures, FSS, a pioneering online fitness subscription platform, and Interesting Agency, a digital marketing and production powerhouse. A member of the marketing faculty at the University of Texas at Austin, Amanda also launched and was named founding director of the Global Center for Influence. She's an experienced lecturer and an inspiring speaker on business growth and marketing. In addition to UT Austin, Amanda regularly lectures at Harvard, Kellogg at Northwestern, the Wharton School, Oxford, London Business School, Bocconi University in Italy, and the University of Stockholm. And of course, we're honored to have her here today, though online, at Rutgers. Her book, The Influencer Code, stands as an authoritative resource for redefining influencer marketing. Russell advises some of the world's largest companies, spanning venture capital firms, luxury brand leaders, and CPG companies. Everyone, please give Amanda a warm Rutgers welcome. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I'm excited to talk about influencer marketing. I think it's a chance to kind of clear the smoke and get to the meat of what influence really is, what it isn't, and why it matters, not just in marketing, but really in business, in relationships, in reputations, and results today. So I know we only have 30 minutes, and you put together some really great questions. I want this to be more of a conversation as well. So if you have, you have 30 minutes to get out of it as much as you possibly can. So it's not television. You can talk back, interject, ask questions in the chat or on here.
Great. Well, let's jump right in. So your career path from Olympic hopeful to creator to founder and educator is extremely compelling. What for you connects those experiences?
So my story is not a straight line. I think a lot of people don't have straight line stories. When I think about it, it sounds more like different lives, a few different lives that somehow collided into one career. Distance runner, YouTuber, entrepreneur, teacher. It didn't make sense at the time and definitely not to my family. But I think hindsight has a funny way of showing you what's right in front of you. And for me, that through line was influence. And when I say influence, I don't mean the flashy follower account kind. I mean the kind that quietly decides who gets trusted, who gets heard, and who really gets the seat at the table. And I think if there's one thing I've learned through this, through the path and my obsession with this idea of influence, which for a long time I didn't have a word, I didn't have a word for it, but there was this common theme, is that influence is not a tactic. It's actually the invisible force that runs the world. And if anything in business or life has to do with people, which we don't live in a silo, then it's an influence problem. So when I was training for the Olympics, influence for me was a coach that believed in me before I did. When I lost that identity overnight to injury, influence became convincing somebody to take a chance on me when I didn't know what I was going to do or who I was anymore. When I stumbled into YouTube, it was discovering this strange subculture where trust and connection mattered much more than credentials and capital. And most recently, I think when teaching this at a business school level, it became more about helping students stop chasing followers and attention and start earning belief and opportunity. I don't think people's lives necessarily follow a playbook. And for me, I kept noticing the same pattern, and which became an obsession. the people that move industries, ideas, decisions, they're not always the loudest, they're not always the most talented or the smartest or the most polished. They're the ones that others feel safe trusting and want to trust. And that's what I teach now, not how to perform influence, but how to become someone or a brand or a company that people want to follow, to hire, to fund, and to vouch for.
Wow, yeah. Well, so you've talked about influence in many different, kind of aspects of your life. If you were to distill all of those, ideas of influence into what maybe one or a few concepts, what do you think is real influence and what do you think isn't?
Yeah, I always struggle with definitions my whole life.
Yeah.
There's so many different ways you can define a word, and definitions are kind of like theories. In practice, they can be slightly different. So, in order to answer that question, let me start with a question for you.
Sure.
If you needed, let's say you have some kind of all of a sudden something goes awry and you need legal advice,
Mm.
like urgently, who
Hmm.
would you trust more? Would you go to someone like online to Kylie Jenner? Or would you seek out maybe somebody your most boring but very brilliant law professor, for example? You're in a university setting, you can have access to that. Now flip it. If you are scrolling your Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and you can hit that little click like heart button, and somebody posts a beauty portrait, the law professor does it and Kylie Jenner does it. I know, weird, but who's getting that little heart click faster? It probably in both, they're very situational, right? But
Yeah.
you're probably going to go to the law professor for the
Yeah,
legal.
absolutely.
Right. And not Kylie Jenner. That's the difference between attention and influence. Kylie
Mm.
has your attention, she is popular, but the professor might have credibility, but the real influence is when somebody has both and knows how to use it within that context.
Mm.
The ability to move people to action. Action can be a behavior, it can be a thought, it can be an actual movement, an action, whatever that is. So ability and action, those are like the two key words. And I think influence gets really, really muddled and confused or equated with social media, with popularity, with attention. And to put it really neatly, I was, thinking when I was learning how to teach this, trying to learn how to teach this, someone said, well, you got to put everything in frameworks and equations and whatnot. And I thought, oh, an equation for this. Okay. Um, Let me see. So this is my best definition of an equation. And for whatever reason, though, it sticks and people remember it. And so for me, that means that's worth the lack of quantitative equation in this. But the equation is influence. Attention minus trust is just more noise, right? It's like
Mm.
I remember this very distinctly. I talk in a lot of examples and analogies because that's the way I remember things. And I
Hmm.
hope you do too. But I remember distinctly when I was living in Los Angeles, I would get stopped at this one stop light all the time. And at that light, there was always a big billboard for the latest movie. And so I always actually was aware of what that movie was. How many times did I actually go see the movie of the recent month or whatever? Like zero. But it got a lot of eyeballs. That was a lot of attention, but it was also just more noise. Attention plus trust. That's influence. And that is where kind of the equation. If you were to look at a chalkboard, attention plus trust equals influence. We get so caught up in the attention, the eyeballs, the popularity, the fame, the clicks, the followers, when attention without trust is just more noise. What do you actually want to achieve? And we live in this world addicted to attention, right? Viral posts, micro trends, algorithm hacks. But most of it doesn't actually move anything. Real influence creates movement, belief, action, thoughts, decision. And it's not a tactic. I think it's a structure. And I've made a career out of trying to figure out ways to actually systematically recreate that, right? Going viral can be a once off. Anybody can be successful in hindsight and do it once. Uh, It's when you're able to start to really put the pieces together to systematically do it again and again and again. That's that's like a systems and structures, and um, that is what I try to do with. That's what we do with influence, and it can be done. It's not a genetic trait. Um,
Yeah.
I like to think of it like architecture. You can't just like decorate the outside of it. Like let's say you build a home and you decorate your outside of your home beautifully, and the inside there's no furniture, there's nothing inside it. There's no foundation. You there's nothing to hold it up. Foundation is like the foundation of influence is trust. Uh,
Mm,
and we can come to that. What is then it becomes what is trust, right? But to
right.
real or in a nutshell, you could have 2 million followers on your TikTok or whatever the platform, LinkedIn account, um, or you could have 20 people who change their behavior or who stand behind you or who going to seed your investment, seed your idea or whatever it is because they believe in you, and that moves
Mm,
the needle. Influence is belief transfer. And it's not scalable, but that's what I mean is, sorry, it's not scalable, but it's transferable, which means,
right.
we say, what does that mean? The scalable, transferable jargon. It's like, you might not know me at all. How many of you guys are in business schools, right? You're on campus. How many of you have heard somebody else pitch an idea to you or say they have an idea for a business? Love it. Great. If
Mm,
you're at a coffee shop on campus and someone's like, I've got this great idea, and they start talking your ear off about this idea, and you're kind of like, great, like that could be a good idea, could not be, doesn't really matter actually. The question is, do you believe how likely do you think they're going to be like super successful, the next Mark Zuckerberg? Usually pretty slim chances, especially if you don't know anything about them. However, you still, in that same moment, let's say you still don't know anything about them, but they happen to add on that Sequoia Ventures and Warren Buffett have become angel investors or invested in their idea. Now you can don't know anything more about them. Does all of a sudden your entire perspective kind of change?
absolutely.
And
Speaking personally, yes.
yeah, right. Well, for most people, I think even if you don't like them or whatever, you're automatically you just go, oh, well, what's your name again? What's that idea again? Let's unpack this. Who are you? Because you believe that because Warren Buffett and Sequoia, notice Sequoia is not a person, it's a company, is an influencer. Because
Mm,
and that influence transfers when they put your name behind it. So uh, I like to say visibility gets attention, but relationship capital gets everything else. And it's a big, big factor in influence. The world is built on relationships. So to kind of sum it up, what is real influence? It's the ability to create action.
wow. Fascinating. You talk about this equation. Um, which piece of this equation, for example, do you think that brands are misconstruing today? Do you think it's the trust piece or is it something else?
I think the biggest myth in influencer marketing is that influencer marketing is social media marketing.
Yeah.
Um, and social media is absolutely a form of a channel for marketing.
Hmm.
But influence and social does not equal social media. Influence existed long before Instagram or social platforms or of any of that. If you think about it, as social platforms are just channels, they are like telephones. They carry the message, but they're not the message. So it's like just like um, years ago, you wouldn't have said the telephone influenced me to go to this restaurant. It was the person behind the telephone, right? It was the friend behind it, the whoever it was, your sister, brother, mother. Yet so many brands are still treating influencer marketing like media buying, and
Mm,
advertising, impressions, clicks, CPMs. They even start with the question, "Who's the right influencer?" As if there's like an all projecting godlike influencer that's influence all of their audience to change their
yeah.
brand. Right? Uh,
Yeah.
and they that this nuance seems little, but it's huge because it entirely changes the entire trajectory and system of how you would even approach this. And they start renting attention where they need to really be earning trust and belief. So influencer marketing being social media, being equated to social media is probably the number one thing. In fact, every time people learn that I teach, especially like let's say at a cocktail party, oh, you teach influencer. I really need help with our social media strategy. And yes, social media can be a tactic, absolutely, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's not. We're going to do influencer marketing, so we're going to get on Instagram. The second misconception is that influence is equal to popularity. And that's the billboard example that I gave you, right? That's that's because you got a ton of eyeballs or a ton of followers that you are an influencer. There are, I mean, right now I think you can't even get out of a taxi cab without hitting the door on somebody, a self-proclaimed influencer, right? There's if you think about it, everybody's influential in some way to something. Um, where where it gets where influence and popularity differ drastically is what are you actually influencing, what is the behavior and who is the audience, and so it's extremely contextual. um, and so I think the same applies in classrooms, campaigns, boardrooms. Having an audience does not mean you have influence. um, and then finally, the fact that influence is universal, that's the third major misconception, meaning that like what moves one audience doesn't necessarily move another audience. A great example of this, and there's many, but I don't know if any of you remember, there was a supermodel named Kate Upton, and she did a campaign. So as a female supermodel, you would think that she would be a really great influencer for a beauty brand, right, or a makeup brand. So Bobbi Brown paid her a lot of money to become the face of Bobbi Brown. She could not move. She was not influencing at all women to buy lipsticks or makeup, which seems counterintuitive because they would start with, well, female makeup. However, the counter side of this is that she then became at the face of Game of War, which is a video game series, and she was extremely influential, like millions of downloads a day influential for Game of War. What video game supermodel, female supermodel, not Bobbi Brown. Why? Because her real audience that she influenced was not women buying makeup. It was actually men playing mobile games that followed her, wanted to watch her, wanted to follow where she was going to be, to download, to see her. So that's the difference that context makes. And if they had started with where really is our audience, what do we really need to achieve, they would have learned that Kate Upton was actually not, she might have been popular, but she was not the one influencing their audience on the decision at hand. And so that's the difference context makes. It's not universal. Just like you all have great teachers that adjust their messages for each class, a great brand does the same for each audience. And I think when companies start grasping this and people start grasping this and stop asking how many people saw this, and
Mhm.
start asking what happened, like what was the actual goal we were trying to achieve, I think that we're going to start working in the right direction, because the smartest brands don't use it as a tactic. They use it as a structural advantage.
Right. We had a follow-up comment from Michelle in our audience. She said, coming from a small creator slash influencer, something that gets me mad about the industry is that most brands only want to work with, I think, influencers over 20,000 followers, but most of their followers aren't engaged followers, which I think speaks, very well to the point that you've made. On the flip side of the coin, I think that we as marketers see going viral as kind of, the holy grail, or like something to really aspire to when we collaborate with influencers or when we, post on social media. But what do you think is a better North Star, or what do you think we should aim for rather than going viral?
I like this. I like that question, and I get asked, and a lot. How do I go viral? And
Yeah,
it's almost like, how do I like win the lottery? Really,
right.
at this point. And we like to point to the exceptions. Going viral, I think the idea of asking how to go viral is the wrong question to start asking. It's also the same reason that I think it's frustrating to see brands that are looking for just a certain number of followers versus who's really moving their audience. Um, Rather find a different question to ask, which is what as a brand or as a human, whatever it is, what do we actually want to achieve? Like what are we, why do we want a following? Why do we want clicks? Why do we want the vote or the sale? And that question is going to shift how you think about it. Virality is really seductive, but it's really shallow. Going viral is like a moment, and influence is like building a moat around yourself or your brand. So a better North Star is the goal. It starts with the goal. And goals and objectives are a slight nuance here, because if somebody says, well, our goal is to gain more attention, that could be an objective. But why do you want more attention? What do you
Mm.
actually like kind of follow the whole thing up? And there's a framework that I use called 3 Bs. It's again, it's another really quantified one, really complex. It's called three Bs, and it stands for brand, buzz, and behavior. And I love this because it's super, super simple to remember. And honestly, if you ever want to impress your boss or look smart, when you presenting a new idea, or they present a new and they say, should we do this campaign or not? Be like, well, let me get out this Venn diagram of the 3 Bs and draw it on the board and apply this framework, because it will shine a light on so many things. And here's to give you an example of this in practice. So there was this story years ago of at the Olympic, I forget which Olympic Games it was at now, but a brand did, it was a hotel brand, and they decided to try to attract as much attention as possible by doing something really outlandish. So during the women's diving, not ceremony, but diving competition, they had this guy dressed up in like a tutu and like crash the pool during the women's Olympic diving um, competition. And so this of course would be the equivalent of viral. It was like they were called it the fool in the pool, the fool in the pool, the fool in the pool. It got a ton of buzz. One of the B's, tons of buzz. However, nobody actually was, when people were retelling the story, nobody even associated fool in the pool with this hotel.
Right.
Then third, so it wasn't on brand. And then number three, the behavior, which is, I'm assuming, something to do with raising like hotel rates, or, sorry, raising like hotel capacity, bookings and whatnot, more hotel exposure, nicer brand image. That behavior was completely out the window.
Right.
So yes, the marketing team, the advertising team got tons and tons of buzz, but I'm thinking somebody probably got fired because no, wasn't on brand and there was no behavior follow through. So
Right.
you take those 3 Bs and you apply it to anything. It's not just the buzz you're looking at. You're looking at, as a company, you're looking at the brand, and the brand, is it on brand? Does it help the brand image? Is it tied to the brand? And what is the behavior we really want to achieve? Most people and brands, like I think you said, there's a question in the chat, are building and thinking in terms of buzz and awareness. The smart ones are building for behavior.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. The fool in the pool sounds more related to like Kool-Aid, for example, than a hotel a hotel chain. Um, Interesting. I don't know why they thought that would work.
Like, just
Michelle,
be different, just do something crazy.
right, right, just something totally out there. Michelle in the chat says, I agree. A lot of brands are relying on influencers or celebrities to gain virality for their ad, but the influencer or the ad doesn't relate to the product at all. Totally agree.
And
Um,
there's also, just to piggyback on that for a
yeah,
second, I think it was the New York Times a couple years ago that did, they were doing research, and we talked to them about it, about this exact thing, which was like, well, like, is the use of celebrities as influencers? So you agree or not agree with that? And it's not like again, it's the best answer is it depends. It's not
yeah.
one size fits all. Like there are occasions on where the celebrity really does increase the brand image or the role of the brand, but it's also is how there's a whole other play. I mean, you can go through a whole other framework for that. Are they like when what's their name? Was it Charlie D'Amelio and Dunkin'
Hmm.
Donuts?
Hmm.
She
Yep.
was known when she got started, she was known that she would carry a Dunkin' Donuts drink in her videos because she felt like it was her crutch and she loved it. It was so authentic to her. So when they put out a drink, all her fans were, it was a brand partnership built perfectly. But yet you got Conor McGregor doing Burger King, and he completely lost trust. Both he lost trust, and Burger King got a lot of flack for it because they're like, Conor McGregor is not sitting on his private jet eating Burger King.
Right.
So, it's brand fit. There's a lot of different things involved.
Yeah. When we talk about behavior, we have a question from Kira in the audience, and I'm glad you asked this question because this is something that I've personally struggled with. What are your thoughts on social media converting to sales directly? How can we measure that? I know that's kind of, the question on everybody's minds when we talk about influencer.
Yeah, that's like the age-old question in marketing, right? Is how to
Right.
measure, how do you measure marketing?
Yeah.
And I love that. It's a great question. I think I talk about something called um, I call it HIM, high intensity influencer marketing measurement. And the reason for that is because it reminds me of HIIT workouts, high intensity interval
Hmm.
workouts, which is
Hmm.
more bang, more or less time, more bang, less time. But
Yeah.
the reason I talk about it this way is because we tend to be so focused on direct attribution. It's
Mm.
almost impossible, even if we were to ask somebody point blank, why did you choose the brand of purse that you've bought? It's everyone's going to say a bunch of different things, but there are so many different factors that play in that you couldn't possibly, even if you're honest, you don't even know them all. So to create direct attribution, uh to try to create a direct attribution measuring marketing like on that is almost is it does an unfair job. So what
Mm.
I like to do is, yes, that doesn't mean you just throw metrics out the window. It means you measure, and there's various different ways to do that. But I think the measurement and the narrative part of it are extremely important. So like when the metrics, when the numbers and the story don't conflict, default to the story, but use the metrics. So I actually came from a background of market research and data science in marketing. And I can tell you right now, you can spin data a lot of different ways.
Hmm.
And so to fit your story. So I kind of think lost a little bit of faith in just using numbers because of like, oh, well, if you spin it this way and that way, you can kind of tell the story. But if the story doesn't lie. So what I mean by that is you could take like, what are the I mean, social media, you can measure number of clicks and conversions and whatnot. Great. But the chances that there, first of all, the number of frequencies that somebody needs to have to learn about a brand and then trust it and click through is usually not just randomly the first one. I think how to do it better is to kind of like before, during, and after campaigns, regional campaigns. Like, okay, so we did this in this market for this amount of time. We didn't do it in this market. Like, was there shifts? This is where we were before. This is where we were after. This is how did it shift? How like what actually happened? But then also like to talk to customers, like get in the market. I think too many brands aren't really out there really talking to their consumers and their audience of what's really going on. Like how many times have you um been recommended or overheard a recommendation for a restaurant, and the part of the reason that you went was because you thought that the person recommending it had no motive. They weren't getting kickbacks from the restaurant. I brought up that billboard example. Okay, so a really interesting principle of, it's called the frequency illusion, but then is that when the more and more you see something, right, the more you start to like it or feel like you have an affection towards it or trust it. I saw this billboard every single day. The flip side is that there was one movie. I'm not a big moviegoer, to the theater, that is. There was one movie that came out, and I saw that movie. Here's why I saw the movie. I had seen the billboard every single day on my way to work. Sat there, watched it, but one weekend I met brunch with friends, and somebody's raving about this movie. had they just been raving about the movie without me ever seeing the billboard, I don't know if I would have went. The billboard itself wasn't enough for me to see it. It was that combination, right? That perfect
Mhm.
storm. How do you
Yeah,
quantify that? And but that's where the narrative doesn't lie. And so the more narrative, the more anecdotes, the more um, narrative and observation that you have to become like an observation detective that you
right.
put together to create the picture of what really happened using, but yes, of course, you're going to use all the, we have endless amounts of metrics now to tell a story.
Yeah, that's interesting. It sounds like you observed the marketing funnel in real time. You had the awareness, and then you were considering it with your friend, and then you ended up going to see the movie.
Yeah, and now though, I don't even know if the funnel still exists. I mean, now it's like you can
Yeah.
also just go from like right away to I really just I your sister-in-law tells you you really need this, I don't know, medical device for your heart problem, and she's not a doctor, she has no expertise, but you're like, "Oh, but you know you think she has your best interest at heart and she knows you, you trust her." So immediately you're like, "What's the name? How many times have you done that? What's the name? Let me order that right now." There's
Yeah.
yeah, no sales, there's no research phase, there's no, it's just a boom.
Right. Right. Lot of questions in the chat. Thank you, everyone. These are great. I'll start, I guess, with Kira's question. Strongly agree. Brands do not talk directly with their customers enough. Follow up to the previous question. What do you say to explain to older generations that feel social should be directly tied to sales? I think that's a great question.
That feels social should be directly tied to sales.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Here's a really quickly, I would say, what is the ROI you have on the relationship with your daughter or son or or mother or father? Meaning return on the, what is your return on investment? And that paints a picture of, look at like, would you, the things that you would do or not do, or the things that are you could be influenced by nature of a relationship, it's almost impossible to quantify that. But yet almost no one, I don't think, would deny that, pick a person in their life that is really important to them. That there's extreme value, even though, well, how do you quantify that? How would you, what would you put a number on that? So I think the best way to explain something is to put it in terms that people understand. So instead of talking about your whatever you're trying to prove or your social media, they might not even understand. So someone that doesn't understand, so I'm thinking about my dad, like, who does not understand social media at all. I'm not going to be like, so there's this thing, on Instagram, and see how this works. Like it's like trying to convince somebody on the left to go to the right, or the right to the left, right? You're not going to, the more you talk, the more you're not going to convince them, but put it into some in terms that they go, aha, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? Meet them halfway. You got to get them to first base. Before you can go to third base, everybody's got to be on first base together first. And so getting them there for they go, aha, yes, I understand. Okay, great. Now let's move on to another example of how this works. Um, and just like I've given you the examples today, how many of you and I can't really see everybody here, but how many by show of hands, like, if I say social media doesn't, you can't direct attribute, but if I say, oh, but do you see how that worked? Where my friends told me about this movie and I saw it on a billboard, and see how that compounding factor worked, but you can't actually attribute one. Do you go, oh yeah, I see how that worked, right? That humans, we need, the best thing you could do is, first of all, understand it fully yourself, and then explain it in terms so that they fully understand and they get it.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna ask you one more question and then I promise everyone in the audience I will get to your questions. So let's say that, you are trying to get everyone on the same page, you're trying to get everyone to first base. How do you, as the brand, then build authentic community from scratch, especially without a huge following?
It's interesting. Been doing this, like, kind of a little bit of a case study myself, research study in the past 6 months on exactly this. How do you do it today? Not like 5 years
Hmm.
ago, but to constantly do it. And my thesis about it changed very drastically in the first month. of doing even YouTube videos in 2025 versus, even a few years ago. And that is that these platforms are built they are advertising platforms, and they are organic. The concept of going viral or the organic growth is just not, it's I won't say not possible. It's more like the viral winning the lottery. The platforms, unless you're going to spend a lot of money, aren't set up the way they used to be. And I mean, I couldn't have built what I built back then today the same way. You could say all the things, consistent content, like I know you're all nurturing your audience, all the things. They're still built very, very differently unless you're going to spend a lot of money on advertising a month. Personally, that number is staggering if you know what some of the brands are paying right now for SEO and for advertising. So I think actually it goes back to full circle, which is you're stop thinking so much in terms of size of audience. Think about who that audience needs to be. So who really are the influencers? Who really is moving my market or helping create that decision at hand? Who's influencing the votes? Who's influencing what brand of sneaker that somebody's purchasing? Like, where are they going for their information? And you want to find the key people influencers within those areas, right? It's better to have a small audience of really strong, truly influential, they become your marketing army, and nurture that audience that will slowly start to grow. It's a longer game, but I think full circle, it's building the infrastructure versus trying to pitch a tent. I'll give you one example that puts this into practice really well. There's a company called Tractor Supply. For those of you who don't know Tractor Supply, I didn't actually until I moved to Texas, but it's like the Walmart of food and supply and farming and whatnot. And they have a big home farming category. Their marketing team had a big challenge. And their challenge was that they had to increase sales in the home farming category. Okay, you're Tractor Supply and you're trying as a marketer to increase sales in home farming, and they believe that the way to do this is, you know, social media marketing. Well, are you going to be able to influence? Is your audience of home do-it-yourself farmers? Do you think they're scrolling Instagram looking for like where to buy feed and supply? I mean, no, maybe not really. That would be a really futile argument. What they did, which was actually really, this is real influencer marketing. They, number one, they understood their goal, right? Increase sales in this category. Number two, who really is their audience? And where are they observe them? Where are they looking? Where are they finding their information regarding in this context? And what they did by researching and really observing them was they found this guy who's actually, it's a real thing. It's a grown man. His name is Andy Schneider, who called himself the Chicken Whisperer. Andy Schneider is this man that learned home farming in his backyard and started a blog talk radio show. This blog talk radio show is going to blow your mind. This is, I can't, you need to find your Chicken Whisperer, whatever brand you're with, because the Chicken Whisperer, he has a blog talk radio show at the time, 2 hours a day, Monday through Thursday. Andy Schneider would talk about raising chickens in your backyard, which is already mind-blowing enough, right? What do you talk about for 2 hours? Well, I don't raise chickens, so I don't know. But not only was there that, the fact was that he had on average, daily 20,000 enthusiastic backyard chicken farmers tuning in. It was an influence match made in heaven. So Tractor Supply did a partnership with Chicken Whisperer, and they started doing seminars at Tractor Supplies. Well, these seminars would sell out so fast. And not only would they sell out, in one seminar, they would in that hour, they would sell about $25,000 to $35,000 worth of chicken stuff, which is like feeds, coops. And if you think about it, once you buy that stuff, you have to keep buying it too. If you get into the do-it-yourself chicken farming category. Anyways, it was so popular that then they did a long term. That was the long term versus the short term. They really scaled this long term. It wasn't just a one hit wonder. They became like a long term collaboration. I think he's got like a magazine now, Tractor Supply, called Chicken Whisperer, a show. It's a whole brand. But that is influencer marketing, where it is not about simply the size of it's really, I talk about it a lot as a three-step process. Number one, what is your goal? To observe, not just who is your audience, but really where is your audience going? Like what is influencing them at the decision at hand? And then three, the connection, creating a real connection, not a transaction.
Right. Wow, I gotta tune into Chicken Whisperer now. You made it sound so compelling.
You're all gonna
Yeah.
start. Yeah, I'm hoping you're all gonna start raising chickens in your backyard.
Yeah, right. And I live in New York City, so I'm like, where's
Yeah,
my
yeah, that'd
backyard?
be next level. That's a new kind of channel.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'll let you know when my Raising Chickens in the City channel is out. Stay tuned. All right, let's move to some questions that we have from our audience. Ben, if you guys, I'll go ahead and read them off, or unless you want to raise your hand and, ask directly, that's fine too. Um, Ben, your question is, I know you mentioned Kate Upton as an example of how the same influencer can be a great fit for one brand, but not another, like Game of War versus Bobby Brown. Is there another well-known brand you think does influencer marketing particularly well, or one that tends to miss the mark by chasing attention instead of influence?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many great. I mean, let's see. Chicken Whisperers one we've done really well. Um, the Conor McGregor in terms of celebrity stuff. I think the Conor McGregor, Charlie D'Amelio example is a good exact contrast of one that works and one that doesn't work. So I don't think you could actually say there's a blanket, it works or it doesn't work. Again, the most right answer is it depends. And to be really great at doing marketing in general, you have to be a really great detective and very curious and constantly observing. Like if there's no one size fits all, but there are things that okay, it worked here, it doesn't work here, but you have to be like almost obsessive about really understanding your audience and the market and the stakeholders at hand and what's influencing them. And like, Lululemon is one of the always the case studies that people come back to um, on influencer marketing. They did organic. They really did influencer marketing well in that they never actually paid anyone. They developed partnerships. They were one of the first to really identify um, identify people that really were in front of their audience, trainers and yoga instructors and whatnot, that really did have the personal influence over their target audience. And they built partnerships with them. They supplied them product. They gave them space to host events. And a lot of brands have followed that. That's actually how I scaled my fitness brand. We had a certification at one point, and I that what I did was I actually went and found some of the most popular trainers and fitness instructors at really in major cities that had followings that at this time they didn't have the a lot of trainers and fitness people didn't have any kind of personal brand online, or they were having to trade time for money. And so my pitch was like, well, instead of just trading time for money, what are all your clients and doing on the days you're not training them or you don't have classes? We can build you the subscription model and the plans that you can put them on. You're going to get a big percentage of this. We'll build your face, your name, your landing page. It'll look all like you. Um, but but now you've built your personal brand. You're not trading time for money. Now you look like you have this program, what you do. And in exchange, they were marketing my program. So it was that, I think that's really, it's a win-win. And I think that's the key to making a really great partnership is it's not transactional. It's really truly like each party is really getting something out of it and wants to be a part of it and mutually motivated and incentivized to want growth.
Yeah, wow, that's interesting. I'm switching gears a little bit to Eric's question. And Alexandra, I promise you I see yours and I'm gonna get to it. Um, Eric asks, in what aspects do you think financial institutions can learn or adopt the most from influencer marketing?
Gosh, a lot. So actually, one of the clients of mine, and I won't name them, is one of a very, very big investment bank, and they probably need it more than anyone. And I think for the longest time, this investment bank, which again is extremely you would be shocked to know that they only ever actually had an internal marketing department starting in 2012, which blew my mind. And they are one of the biggest banks in the world. Right now, they are struggling, specifically in their private wealth division, because they are losing out to a lot of more boutique firms and family offices and whatnot. So they're trying to think, how do we win back? Like we've relied solely on our reputation, but now we're completely diluted. So they were doing they were putting a lot of money into influencer marketing, meaning doing really fancy like parties and whatnot with celebrities or thought leaders or whatnot, and inviting their some of their big private wealth clients. And they weren't getting any traction. People weren't even attending really. And so when we talked, when I was brought in, my first thought was, well, why, who are the, let's see the profile of some of these private wealth clients. Well, if you look at these private wealth clients, they are in their own right, or if not mainstream in their heads, they are thought leaders, celebrities, or big important, or they think they're not going to go to an event to get a signing from some influencer or celebrity. There's a different mindset. They're already in that world anyways. Actually, when you study that clientele, what they really want is they want connection, belonging, exclusivity. So they don't want to have to just go to some signing where they're like invited and get, oh wow, you're gonna sign my shirt. Rather something that feels very exclusive and connecting, in destinations that are hard to get to, like really build out these bespoke experiences for them. And so the influencers are not like these quote unquote like celebrities or somebody with a following. Their influencers are actually, what we found, were mainly destinations like St. Bart's, St. Moritz. Those locations were in Aspen, Colorado. Those locations were, they had these people that already went to these kind of places, they wanted to be there, and now they had reason to be there. And so then they were curating events, polo in Spain, like these kind of events were truly the way. And it was almost like the less that you're going to prop a name, and the more personal the invite was, the more you're going to get that clientele. That, along with really a lot of bespoke white glove treatment, which is what the boutique and family offices were doing, which is, we would like to get to know you. Like, think about this. This is marketing one in general. We really want to get to know you and your family. What matters to you and your family? What can we do for you and your point of contact is going to be Betty. And Betty is, and they get to know Betty. Betty is X, Y, and Z. This is where Betty's from. This is her family. The more points of contact, the more close and connected, the more they feel connected. And that they will, then there's this trust in this white glove service. We will take care of everything. Does your father need to be moved? Oh, your father needs to be moved into a nursing home. Well, we are going to take care of that research. These are things that the big investment banks weren't thinking of to do, because they were just relying on their name and then just putting money into celebrities and influencers. So it's a lot. So influencer marketing, I think, to shift your perspective on how it works, especially the financial institutions, is a great one. It's not like, okay, we're going to pay someone to be like, hey, bank here on a social media platform. It's really who is influencing our market. And they don't necessarily even have to be single individual people. Like I said, locations, companies. When Oprah puts her book club sticker on a book, whether or not it's a great book or not, all of a sudden that book just shoots right up, right?
Yep. A
Those
great
are,
lesson in influencer marketing not being a one size fits all, and how you really have to pay attention uh to the audience, to your audience.
yeah.
Um, think maybe we have time for one more question, and this one is from Alexandra in the audience. From someone who comes from a background of social media marketing for brands, how do you recommend getting your foot in the door to Randall land a role in influencer marketing? I want to get more into the influencer slash partnership part of marketing, but most of the roles I'm seeing want prior experience with creators.
Actually, I don't know exactly where or if you're on the agency side or brand side. I think the best way to get a position in any way, in my experience, is to create it yourself. Create create the project, figure out what the problem is, and solve it. So if you're working for, I don't know if you're working for specifically a brand or the versus an agency, but what are they struggling with? What are they dealing with? And instead of asking for a job, do a project or do the work for them. I think that's something that's very overlooked, but like every manager, leader, it's like, oh, I want this role. I want this. We don't know. We don't know what you're capable of. Like when somebody takes the initiative and just identifies that, hey, not I see you. I actually understand your market, your problem. This is where I think we could do this. Could we, would you think about implementing this? Could we even do like a pilot program where I could have a tester cake to test it, show you've done the work, and very few are someone going to shut the door for you. And if you're willing to do it, especially if you're willing to do it for free for a little bit, just to say, to show that you believe in it and that you want the chance, that does not go unlooked. I think the best jobs are never on a job board. They're created and positions are open for people when people want to work with them because they're valuable.
Yeah, definitely. I think this will probably be our last question, actually. A very timely one from Alice in the audience. How has generative AI changed influencer marketing?
It's made content, I think, a lot easier to 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 churn out and produce. I really don't think that, I mean, AI is pretty much just like the air we breathe now. It's the tech of our time. Um, I think it actually makes influence more important and the human aspect of it more important. Meaning that what are the things that AI will never be able to replicate, which are human connection and feeling and interpretation, discernment. And then I think that there's going to be something really almost full circle about coming back to like, this is, this is completely human written, or we're going to do things, I think, coming back to in person, like with a real connection, bringing people live together. Those are going to have the more human elements, the more important. But AI is already going to make things a lot more efficient. You have to know. I mean, it's going to be, it's not a, do I know this or not? It's used in everything. And I think, in my influencer marketing courses, a lot of my courses, I don't teach AI um as a separate thing. It's just here are the tools to use as you're going about doing X, Y, and Z, right? Like research. Here are the tools to do this. When we're pulling this, when we're doing an audit, when we're doing an influencer audit, a brand audit, here are some ways to do it. And here's some different perspectives to use. Here's how to prompt and whatnot. These are tools that are going to help you do it more efficiently. If you don't use it, then you're already out of the game. So you kind of need to be able to do it. But I think it really helps make understanding what is really going to influence your audience, influence your audience even more important.
Hmm, interesting. Um, I keep saying last question, but this will be really the last one. Thank you guys so much for all your thoughtful questions in the audience. Um, Kira says, what are your thoughts on this within the pharma industry specifically, especially with the amount of regulation pharma has to keep in mind? Do you think that the regulatory aspects kind of change any of, the thoughts that we've been discussing and sharing about influence and influencer marketing?
Yeah, I mean, it's first of all, I don't the US is actually one of the only countries in the world that is allowed to advertise pharmaceuticals. So I'm from Canada, and we're not allowed to do any advertising for pharmaceuticals. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen different ways. I'm not through fully like up to date on what the regulations are, but I would say across the board, in any industry, there you have to have a like there's still rules and regulations. We have a whole module on how to understand the laws and regulations within your industry, and it becomes nuanced because oftentimes you're dealing with humans and personalities and people that it mixes into their real life. And there's a lot of things that I think there's a lot of nuances that even if you have a lawyer, as a marketer, as a marketer that's doing influencer marketing with people, there's a lot of things that you have to be able to understand and ask the right questions, even with a lawyer. So for example, um, and this isn't pharmaceutical specifically, but I'll just give you one quick example, but this happens a lot. Misunderstandings when when a brand says, okay, we're going to pay you X amount of dollars, here is the wireless earbuds or the supplement that you're going to, show in your video or whatnot. And this happens also in mainstream advertising as well. And you're gonna place the product. Well, there's many different ways you can place the product. The creative control has to be thought about a lot, because you could place the product in a way that is completely in the video the entire time, or in the ad the entire time, but yet no one calls it out. There's no logos, there's no mention. But according to the contract, they did put the product in the entire time. Then there's, okay, well, they put it in and they had the brand and it was kind of front and center sitting on the table or whatever, but they didn't really talk to what it does or any of the benefits. And then there's, okay, we want it centered, we want the whole thing to be around this. And with influencers, like, if you unless you spec you have to specify every little thing. That, and then also, like, there's so many little nuances. What they'll do is you could spell everything out and they'll be like, great, great, great. And then the video comes out, you approve it, you're like, this is perfect, okay. And then 24 hours later, they've just taken down everything. Well, they can do that actually, because you didn't specify that they had to keep it up. It's pharmaceuticals, and what I'm thinking is, regulation wise, what they could also do and would be, they could either take it down, or they could put some kind of, like, they could do a counter blog post or something to protect their reputation, to say, oh, just so you know, like, I have to pay my bills. And so of course I took the money for this, but, and then people tend to like that authenticity even more. Like, oh man, they paid you off to that. Like, yeah, but I had to pay my bills this month. That's how I make a living. And then it throws the brand under the bus, but they actually, they did everything that the brand asked them to do.
Yeah. Um, well, guys, thank you in the chat for all of your questions. These have been really thought-provoking and have really spanned the gamut. Thank you everyone for joining today. And Amanda, thank you so much for being so generous with your time, for all of your insights. This has been incredibly thought-provoking and has really, for me personally, has really shifted the way that I think about, influencer marketing. So can't thank you enough and really appreciate your time. Thanks everyone and have a great
Thank
Friday.
you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course, our pleasure. Bye everyone.
Bye-bye.